So can I ask everybody today to be on best behaviour? This is a peaceful protest.
From across Wales this morning, they headed towards Cardiff. Barely a spare seat on this coach from Cowbridge in the Vale of Glamorgan, carrying farmers and their supporters.
Well, you'd support them. Their hardship is our hardship.
Police had asked for tractors to be kept away, but dozens still came, lining a dual carriageway.
We're going to protest the way we've been treated in this country as farmers.
Without rural Wales.
And protest they did, in their thousands, before the steps of the Welsh Parliament.
We shall fight in the auction marts. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets.
There are things that we can do better as farmers. We have changed the way we do things, and we will continue to look after the countryside and the environment as we always have done. And all we want is to be treated fairly.
There are different grievances fueling these protests in Wales, from water pollution regulations to bovine TB policies. But for many here, one issue in particular has become a lightning rod for their anger, and that's the Welsh Government's proposed new post-Brexit system of public payments for farmers. And the idea is that that is a system of land use in the future which involves food production, mitigating and adapting to climate change, and trying to reverse massive declines in biodiversity. The proposed sustainable farming scheme would pay farmers for meeting certain conditions, such as having 10% of a farm managed as habitat, and by 2030, another 10% under tree cover.
But this is just a step too far.
Why is it a step too far? Because the Welsh Government's saying that farms should still be viable and do the tree planting.
Now. You know, nobody's making any money now. We're struggling to survive now, and this is just going to be a step too far. We won't be here. I'm going to get out and go and drive a lorry somewhere or do something different.
Are you happy with the sustainable farming scheme?
The Labour government's political opponents here queued up today to add their criticism, echoing farming unions who claim land would be taken out of production and thousands of jobs lost.
This is about the fact that the scheme needs to be universal. There will be the haves and the have-nots. The haves who've got 10% trees, the have-nots who haven't. How can we split up our farming population when we're going to be asked to deliver for so many? In your view, what should the Welsh Government do with this scheme now? The problem with the scheme now is it is so toxic. No one is going to buy into it.
We farm around 600 breeding ewes, all Welsh mountain ewes.
Tony Davis in the Ellen Valley also wants to see some changes, but the principle of creating more habitats and planting more trees has worked for him, he says. Broadly, he supports the proposals.
This field now in the winter looks just like any other normal field, but actually it's a habitat field. It's been in hay meadow reversion for several years. In the summer months, it's just full of wildflowers. As farmers, you know, we have the land. I do really think this is a massive opportunity. We are in the middle of a climate and nature emergency. And, you know, I wanted my farm to be part of the solution.
I urge you as a farming community, myself included, to continue to raise your voices.
Back in Cardiff, the Welsh Government yesterday declared it was considering a new economic analysis of the scheme, a review of any options around tree planting too. It remains, they point out, a consultation. It looks like your hand has been forced because of the protests.
No, not at all. I think one element of it was to show that we are listening and changes will be made, and there are things that we are doing, slightly earlier than we planned, for instance. There isn't one proposal set out in that sustainable farming scheme consultation that is set in stone. I want to make that really clear to people. We need to hear their voices.
There is no shortage of voices on this issue. These protests have been building for some time. Today's the largest yet. The Welsh Government's consultation ends next month. It will then fall to a new First Minister to oversee the future direction of a scheme years in the making.